Every time a new FromSoftware game comes out, there is always a debate about difficulty in video games, with plenty of news articles and more talking about how it needs an easy mode, as it may be too hard for some people, and with Elden Ring coming out, I already see the articles coming out like clockwork, and I wanted to give my 2 cents. As someone who recently finished their first Souls game, Dark Souls Remastered with 33 hours played, I don't consider myself a godlike gamer. I play a lot of games, and I play games a lot, but I don't think I'm anything special. If it means anything, I've reached Gold 4 in League of Legends and was Silver in CSGO, so I'm pretty average. To start off, I'd like to quote something from the creator of this series. We don't want to include difficulty settings because we want to bring everyone to the same level of discussion and the same level of enjoyment. So we want everyone to face that challenge and to overcome it in some way that suits them as a player. We want everyone to feel the sense of accomplishment. We want everyone to feel elated and to join that discussion on the same level. We feel if there's different difficulties, that's going to segment and fragment the user base. People have different experiences based on that. This is something we take to heart when we design games. From that quote, difficulty is being used as a tool, a mechanic, and it is used to not only create one big community around a base level, but also in order to allow the player to feel something through progressing the game. And how they do that doesn't matter to the creators as long as they have the same base level. And easy mode completely destroys the feeling of frustration and the emotional journey you are supposed to feel, and the satisfaction that is gained through finally getting past that boss that you thought was impossible to defeat. Making the game watered down by making bosses easier or anything similar not only divides the community of the game that in large relies on its strong community it has in order to flourish, but also destroys key concepts of the game's identity. The difficulty of these games is part of the experience. It isn't just some meaningless feature that has no impact on the overall experience of the game, and by taking said difficulty out, you are modifying the experience the developers intended for you to have. One thing I can't say I understand is it seems like people who aren't really made for these types of games or don't even enjoy these types of games are trying these types of games, which I know that sounds super gatekeepy, but hear me out. I don't have a problem with people giving it a shot. I really encourage it. I would love to see more people play the game and to hopefully have the same amazing experience that I did, and to feel the same things that I did and many others did throughout their first playthrough, as very few games make me feel what these games do, and I have fallen in love with the series insanely quickly. But I have a similar situation. I like the idea of playing strategy games like StarCraft, but upon trying it and playing it for a while, I realized they weren't the games for me. I couldn't wrap my head around it, and that's absolutely okay. And every now and then I may boot it up and try it out once again and see if it clicks, but the last thing I would ever think is asking the developers to go against how they want their game to be. I couldn't complain about how a handful of games out of the literal millions out there I can't play due to the developer's intended experience being outside my comfort, skill, effort range, or maybe just not being able to grasp onto and execute certain concepts. Now, before you mentioned accessibility and difficulty are not the same thing. Accessibility is things like colorblind mode, captions for sounds happening in-game like explosions and footsteps, being able to remap buttons, better controllers, and the list goes on. Those things I am in 100% support of, and I think more games should have those types of features. But if you choose to play a game that is known for being difficult and unforgiving on mistakes as that's the intended experience from the developers, and you don't like that, maybe you are playing a game that isn't made for you. If you don't like the developer's vision, don't play it, it's that simple. With that vision comes storytelling, the world around you, and everything else in between. One big part of that is the lore. I am usually not a lore-focused person, but with Dark Souls in particular, the difficulty is important even lore-wise. For example, in short, the game functions like so. You are an absolute nobody and your enemies are legendary knights, huge monsters, and literal gods. The only thing you have going for you is that you cannot fully die. You either respawn and try again, or give up and go hollow forever by essentially calling it quits. If you don't really have much danger of dying, that whole idea is pretty much thrown out the window, and it loses its significance in the storytelling. Another example is Knightatorius, who is an endgame boss who, you guessed it, is a knight, but what is interesting about him is he uses a greatsword with only one hand. Imagine how much strength that it would take to swing a greatsword like he does in the fight with only one hand. His other hand is crippled due to trying to save his wolf companion Sif during a fight, and you hear things about how he was the super powerful knight before the injury, and even with one functional hand, this boss fight was absolutely brutal. And imagining him at full power adds on to the bigger picture and makes the world feel so much more real compared to if you could just face tank his attacks and beat him on the first try. Just lore-wise, it wouldn't have the same impact if the boss wasn't actually difficult, so the difficulty is important to the story, and that's just one example. The difficulty makes everything more important, more satisfying, brings out your emotions more, and creates a strong connection from player to game, which is what really makes these games thrive in my book. I think the main dilemma here is that because 99% of games are accessible in difficulty to such a wide variety of people, whether that is having an easy mode itself or in general just being catered to the more casual crowd, that some people can't seem to wrap their head around the idea that they are going to need to learn attack patterns by dying a few times or much more on bosses. They need to have optimal gear and good mechanics such as rolling and not getting greedy with hits. Because 99% of games let you run into a group of enemies with no punishment and button smash your way to the end of the game with very little thought needed, having a few games that do require learning mechanics throws everyone for a loop. All these games are actually not as hard as people think. They are hard on the aspect of having a learning curve, and these games are going to require more effort, patience, and brain power than something like Minecraft. Dark Souls is challenging, but it's also incredibly fair. Each time you're going to die is because of an action that you didn't read an attack right, you rolled too early or too late, you rushed in and got ambushed, or maybe got too cocky and tried to take on a horde of enemies. I like to think of these games like a game of chess. Your enemy does something and you need to have the appropriate reaction. Do you roll left, right, forwards, backwards? Do you block it with your shield? How many hits can you get in before its next attack comes out? Should you keep your distance or try to stay really close to the boss? Is there any attacks that are easier to punish compared to others? These are the things that you need to figure out while playing these types of games. I have no problem with games that are more so designed for people that have a few hours on their hands after work or school and just want to turn their brain off and go around doing whatever they want without much resistance. But I think looking for that experience within these types of games when basically every single game on the market that is somewhat difficult is instantly named the Dark Souls of strategy games, the Dark Souls of first-person shooters, the list goes on, it's probably not a good idea if you're looking for a more casual experience, and these Soul-type games are incredibly outnumbered compared to their counterpart. If you can't improve or don't want to improve enough to beat a game, maybe the game is just not for you. Every piece of entertainment does not need to cater to everyone, and demanding that they do so is insanity. These games have been beat using bananas, a Dance Dance Revolution pad, a steering wheel, Twitch chat, voice commands, only using the mouse, upside down, with one finger, a rock band guitar, rock band drums, only using their feet, a toaster, as well as other things such as not leveling up, no stamina, no rolling, no spending souls, and my absolute favorite, completing all 5 Soul games within a single session without being hit once throughout all 5 games. Granted, obviously these people have experience with these types of games, but if you put in a bit of effort and time, beating it through atypical means is definitely possible. The games are challenging, not impossible, and if you like the game, you'll keep playing it despite your troubles. Also, easy mode does kind of exist. You can use summons, guides, and farm souls in order to get an extra edge if needed. It seems like the people that want an easy mode don't want to figure out the game's mechanics out whatsoever, and instead want something where everything just kind of flops on the ground and you can't die. Obviously not everyone is like that, but with a combination of summons, good gear, and some guides, I really find it hard to not progress eventually. I think the difficulty problem is more so an effort problem, as you can summon random players who have experience and can help you with bosses that you are having trouble with, and say no one else is around, no big deal, you have NPC summons as well. Moving on, there are very few games within this genre of soul-like games, or whatever you call it. Really all that comes to mind is Sekiro, Bloodborne, the Dark Souls series, and maybe a few others here and there. But there are so many games that are not like this. Pretty much every other game besides these handful of games will have modes where you can tone down things if you are having trouble, and a lot of these non-soul-like games are made with even the normal difficulty being very accessible to nearly everyone, including casual players, even without any difficulty changes. If a core part of a game's design is to require a great degree of skill, knowledge, and practice, and if that design choice has a meaningful and significant impact on the overall game and experience, then you will either work to achieve that through putting in lots of time, research, and effort as you want to experience the game in its entirety, or it's just not made for you and you move on to something else. These games are also designed amazingly to prepare you for the actual difficulty. The start of the game is more difficult compared to your average game, sure, but it preps you for little things like traps, ambushes, and you get a little taste of how it's going to feel. So going forward, you are always on your toes, and safety almost feels a bit off-putting. It doesn't throw you into an endgame boss with 10,000 health that has 10 different attacks that all have similar startup animations, while you have a weapon that does 1 damage per hit. The first boss in Dark Souls Remastered, for example, Asylum Demon, has 3 different attacks, all of which have very clear tells and huge wind-up times. You're given a lot of time to either run away, prepare for a roll, or do whatever else your mind comes to when these attacks happen, and because there's only 3 of them, it gives the player time to learn the mechanics, and it goes the same way for the other early game bosses, with some difficulty spikes here and there. For the Asylum Demon, for example, all you have to do is attack his butt and you'll be safe from all but one attack, which is his Flying Slam, one where you just need to run away. The first 2 bosses also have spots for plunging attacks, which can make the fights even faster. Asylum Demon gives you a window at the start where you can typically do almost a good half of its health with one, and the Taurus Demon, the boss directly after, you can repeat the plunging attack as many times as you want, granted you can get up the ladder without dying on the way up. Its difficulty is exponential, but you also have to be smart and look for the right times to be aggressive. From my experience, these Soulborne games are not really about skill, it's rather about patterns, knowledge, and ultimately failure in order to get set information and using it correctly. Dying in these games is progress. As long as you absorb the new information given to you from that death and learn from it, you are progressing. But if you do the same exact thing you did mindlessly to get yourself killed again and again and again, you aren't going to go very far or last very long within these types of games. These games are all similar to something like dancing, video editing, or speaking another language. At first, doing the little things is really difficult, you might have trouble controlling your character, you might forget what buttons do what, or you'll fall off a cliff because of a message saying to try jumping. But just like with dancing, video editing, and speaking another language, eventually it goes from being hard to do these simple dance moves, doing that one simple effect in Premiere Pro, or to say basic words of a new language, to being second nature. Eventually it clicks, and when it does, it's absolutely amazing. That's the beauty of all these types of games, is that it's so many moving parts coming together, so much learning, and so many failures and death screens, that when you finally get it right and get past that area, that boss, or even that one new enemy, you feel accomplished. And for me, I find that very few games give me that feeling, and that is why difficulty is so important to me personally, and likely the Dark Souls community as a whole. I am not someone I would consider super good at video games. If anything, I am pretty average. I recently basically finished Dark Souls Remastered, which was my first Souls game that I spent more than a couple hours on. I recently beat the game with the DLC with 33 hours in the game. One boss, Ornstein and Smo of course, took me easily 20 to 50 attempts to finally beat. I was really frustrated. Every time I died I had to walk back to the fog gate and try again and again, but eventually, after learning little things here and there on each attempt, like using pillars to block projectiles and to dodge certain dangerous attacks that kept killing me, I finally did it. And the feeling that I got when I saw that health bar hit 0, absolutely priceless. It's a feeling where the more you struggle on the journey, the better it feels in the end. Now, if I would have done it on my first try like most games, it would have been just forgettable, nothing special, and just a minor bump in the road if that. By making the game easier in the form of difficulty settings, it robs the player of that amazing experience and feeling, and although you could argue that some people don't consider that fun, but if these games are meant for you, you'll get those same feelings, and each time you die, you'll be frustrated just like everyone else, but you cannot stop yourself from wanting to try again, even if that means taking a break for a while to recollect yourself. I don't think that every piece of entertainment needs to cater to everyone, and I think that creators of art, which I think video games fall under that category, should be allowed to freely express themselves by giving the experience that they want to, and if you as the player feel like you can't enjoy said thing without the game being changed from the base vision of the developers, then you need to understand that perhaps this game isn't for you in the first place, and that's completely okay. Thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want more content like this, and also comment your opinions down below. I'd really like to hear just from everybody, whether you're a Dark Souls fanatic or just a casual player. I want to hear what you guys think.